Welcome, everybody. I hope you're doing well. As she mentioned, I am the U.S. commissioning editor for WARC. You might ask what a commissioning editor is. Basically, my job is to get as much quality marketing knowledge content onto our platform as possible. If you're not familiar with WARC, our mission is to save the world from ineffective marketing. It sounds like we should all wear capes and, go flying through the universe, making sure that no media dollar is ever wasted. But in fact, we do this through getting as much great thought leadership, content from around the marketing universe or the globe as we can. I also would just urge you, if you are not a WARC subscriber, you can check out our podcasts. Those are free. And we do a lot of US focused content, such as a recent spotlight on DEI, which has gotten a lot of traction, really helping marketers do their job better. With that, I would love to introduce Matt Repicky, who is CMO of Jos A Bank. And Matt, welcome to the stage.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And tell us a little bit about your background, how you got to Jos A Bank, and so forth.
Sure. Yeah, no, thanks for having me. It's great to see everybody today. And yeah, like I was just introed about the potentially odd segue for my career path of working in marketing on the Barbie brand to where I'm at now with Jos A Bank. But, I've been so fortunate in my career thus far and had a lot of diversity, both in industry and location. I've spent a lot of my career at Mattel, the toy company, working specifically on the Barbie brand, which was a phenomenal experience. Also spent a little bit of time at Amazon in their fashion division, which was great. And have been now at Tailored Brands, which is the parent company of Jos A Bank, Men's Warehouse, and a couple other brands in the portfolio for about 2.5 years. And I think one of the through lines that I've found in my career is those brands that need a refresh, need to identify and get in front of a new customer, change their brand perception. As you and I talked about when we connected last week, Cathy, oftentimes that coincides with a review of the marketing mix as well, which is always fun to kind of pick apart and see what you can improve on there. And so, I joined Jos A Bank, like I said, about 2.5 years ago, with the remit to really look at how do we reposition this brand? How do we get in front of a younger millennial customer? We're a specialty menswear retailer, a lot of heritage, been around since 1905. Again, went and did some quick work around what is that brand position, what does the marketing mix look like, and then about 1.5 years ago also took on leadership for the marketing of our wedding business. And I think that's where there's been a lot of interesting work that I've been doing again in the repositioning of that business, a look at the marketing mix, but also, it's so specific to the pandemic and kind of just customer behaviors and where they're sitting right now that we've seen a lot of great momentum and interest in wedding. And so I think, a few things that I can touch on as we talk about that this afternoon.
Well, it's interesting to join any brand 2.5 years ago. That's about when I joined WARC. And I'm sure some of the priorities that you had back then remained priorities, but wow, did a lot ever happen that none of us really saw coming in quite the way they did. I mean, obviously DEI has been a huge topic for a long time, but it is very different now than it was even 2.5 years ago. So I would just first like you to walk us through kind of your DEI efforts and get to why that was important, not only from the right thing to do standpoint, but also in terms of growing your market, which has been an imperative for you.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And I would say even when I was, again, on the Barbie brand, leading brand marketing there, we had a lot of focus on representation and how important that was to the core consumer of that brand, which is, a young girl. And so I think I really found, the impact that purpose-driven brand and purpose-driven marketing can have on a consumer set. And then you fast forward, like you mentioned, to sort of the world we're living in today. And it was funny, Jennifer from LVMH also just touched on, some of the DEI efforts there, which was, again, I think, really great sort of segue to our conversation. But, one of the things that we found at Tailored Brands was that through an employee survey, and this was largely from our store associates, right, as we're talking about retail and commerce today, our store associates really were wanting more representation. They wanted to feel like they could be their true selves at work. And I think as we look at that from, well, what does that mean through a marketing and advertising lens, there was a lot of opportunity for us to show up a little bit differently. And so, to the question of what are some of the things that we've been doing,
Mm-hmm.
6 months ago, again, through the lens of the wedding business that I'm leading marketing for, we shot a campaign where we cast all real couples. We hired a female wedding photographer, so not a commercial photographer, but someone that shoots weddings on a regular basis. We wanted to really like bring that point of view to the campaign. And one of the real couples that we cast was a same-sex couple. And I think in a lot of ways you could say, well, that's something that we could have represented, in prior years. I think, again, the brands and the company really wanted to do it, and we were able to bring it to life this year. And again, the feedback has been phenomenal. And, we get feedback from store associates who are so excited to see signs in the stores now of a same-sex couple, as one small example. We also just shot our prom campaign for spring 2022, because yes, prom is back, and so excited. And I'm sure all of the students are very excited to have their events again. But, again, for the prom campaign, let's look around and make sure that we're representing what the prom goers are seeing, in their everyday life. And so cast talent who are trans, non-binary, who are differently complected. And again, wanting to really make sure that it's not about, checking boxes, it's really about that true representation. And again, similarly, as we've started to roll this campaign out, and it's not really gonna fully hit until early February, but just a lot of excitement on, okay, how do we take these steps to move, again, the brands forward into the point you made. It's absolutely the right thing to do, but there's also just this like immediate response to it, which is just so fantastic to see. And so, I look at, again, some of these things that we've been doing as steps, right? It's always like the adage of progress, not perfection. And there's always going to be work to do. I don't think it's ever done, but it's making sure that you're, again, moving it into sort of what people see and what they expect from you as a nationally recognized brand today.
Yeah, and I would imagine that you were saying that since you were saying that this kind of burbled up from your employees, that we were finally at a time in the culture where your employees would feel kind of empowered to really talk about these things. I mean, maybe this had been a wish for quite a few years, but this is the kind of time where people are speaking up and talking about representation.
Certainly, and I give a lot of credit to the organization and Taylor Brands for asking employees for their perspectives and getting that feedback, and not only going to just the exercise, but then actually taking it in and saying, now we need to act upon it, right? It's easy to go and ask someone their point of view, and then you sit on the result. And that was certainly not the case here. It was, oh, actually, this is something that is like right in front of us, and we need to do something about it, which again, I was really proud to be able to kind of like carry part of that mantle forward in terms of now, how do we show up differently? And then, like I said, actually hearing the immediate response from the store employees saying, oh, wow, A, you heard me. B, I'm really excited by how I feel like I can come to work now and really be my true self.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, when you really embrace DEI, it just takes to so many different facets, and we've been looking really closely at that. So, I know it's kind of early days, but what do you feel you're seeing in terms of results from a marketing perspective, and what metrics are you using to say, okay, we're on the right track here, for instance, to depict real couples as they are and all that kind of stuff? I mean, what do you think you're seeing?
I think to your point, it's still early days. And so as we do more and more, customer research work, I think we'll start to see some of those results with more clarity. If I look back again on some of the work I was able to do on the Barbie brand, by which our sort of quarterly customer surveys started to field back, and we saw the market perception shifts as folks were exposed to the work we were doing. So I have seen the proof points, I've seen the results that the work can do, and those are then trailed hopefully by sales increases and so on and so forth. And so I'm really confident that the things that we're doing now at Taylor Brands will be paying out to that degree. Again, it's just I would say the proof points today, the way that we're validating it, like I said, are I'm getting emails from associates in the field saying,
Mhm.
hey, a customer came in and was really happy to see this, or I feel better about, working here and, coming to work every day. Or again, on our social media, we're getting a lot of great feedback from folks who are saying, this is so great, so exciting, I love it. And I think those are just like those little glimpses that like directionally tell you you're doing the right thing as you thought you were. But I
Yeah.
think over the next number of months, and certainly as we kind of, round out this year, I would say we'll hopefully get something that is a little bit more quantifiable to really show that these, again, were the right decisions and that we're headed in the right direction.
Yeah, no, that's great to see. Also with Barbie, I mean, my Barbies were, that was not a real world kind of depiction. Let's put it that way. When I was a young girl, so
Been a lot of really great change on that brand too. But
yeah,
yeah, and I think one of the things that you started with at the top of the conversation that I really believe as well is around marketing waste, media waste. And so again, I think when we're going through and doing these efforts, right, you also have to make sure that you're understanding your target. And so that consumer research is so important, and really understanding, what people are expecting from you, because you can't be all things to everybody. And again, like in the space that we sit, we definitely have, very specific targets. And so whether it is the, DEI efforts, or again, looking at what, marketing channels we're investing in and where we should be taking those, media waste is always on my mind. And again, making sure that we're sort of hitting and getting in front of the right folks at the right time.
yeah. So, you were mentioning that you went through this whole media analysis. Was one of the big things that you had to do when you came. Obviously, that like intersected with the pandemic, people not going into stores as much. I mean, there was a
Sure.
lot to wrestle with there. So,
Yeah.
how have you altered the media mix, both in terms of just what you were contending with, just as you joined the company, but then also as the pandemic unfolded?
Yeah, no, I definitely took a few turns here and there. And I think, again, like I mentioned earlier, reviewing the marketing mix is something that I've done now a number of times as I've stepped into new roles. And I always look at it, it's not for the sake of changing just to change, but really like putting an eye on, okay, are these the most effective, tactics and ways to get in front of our customers? And are there things that we're potentially missing that we should try out? And I would say, the whole mentality around testing and then scaling was something I learned so acutely during my time at Amazon, that I applied when I went back to the Barbie brand. And I, would say like carried that forward to today. And, when I joined Jos A Bank, it was primarily a TV and catalog, driven marketing mix, and had just started dipping into digital. And I think, to your point, through the pandemic, we've now swayed to be much more digitally focused.
Mhm.
And even within that, though, it's okay. Now we have like our sort of like tried and true channels that we invest in, but it's also always about keeping an eye on where should we be testing and where do we need to show up that's new and different. And, if I look at the wedding business, when I, kind of jumped in there, we're not doing any work with Pinterest, and Pinterest has 500 million wedding pins every year. And so to me, it was
Yeah.
like a natural place that, hey, we're talking to, folks getting married, brides, grooms, partners. We need to be in front of them on a platform like Pinterest. And now we invest, we start, we test, and then we figure out, okay, well, like how high is high? What is the level of investment? What can we do there? What is that relative to, again, the sort of multi-touch, if you will, across our marketing ecosystem? But, I think the move towards digital was one thing during the pandemic that we did, pretty quickly, kind of like a hard right to a lot of degrees. But then within that, it's been, okay, how do we just like find the new places that we should be showing up? And so, for us, we've never been on a platform like Twitch before. Our prom campaign for
Yeah.
spring, we're going to be testing on Twitch. I'm super excited. I think it's a really, again,
It's
a
kind of
lot
where
of
to be.
brands. Sorry.
It's kind of where to be for that demographic.
Totally. And I mean, a lot of brands have already been there for a really long time, who, again, are more squarely in that demo. For us, again, it's a new place to play, but I'm excited to see what the results are. And so, I think as we've gone through the past couple of years, to your point, yes, like our stores all closed for a period of time, as I think all retail did. We've now reopened, but we want to make sure that we're offering sort of that complete omni-channel experience, and that the customer can do what they need to do or want to do with us on our website, do what they want to do or need to do in our stores. But our marketing investment needs to capture sort of the entirety of that journey.
Yeah, yeah. As it's gotten, I imagine it's gotten a lot more complex. I mean, so one thing we've been looking at a lot at work is sort of how performance and branding are just getting much closer together. For instance, if you're talking ad units, sometimes it's the same ad unit. So what are you seeing, in your, not just at Joseph A. Bank, but also in your category, in terms of really trying to make sure that branding and performance are kind of working in lockstep together in a much closer fashion than before?
Yeah, definitely. I was actually just reading something this morning from Deloitte that was their 2022 retail strategy, but it was talking about the role that brand plays, if you will, right? And
Mhm.
I think a lot of organizations separate the two. I've been in those organizations. I think they need to work in concert. And you are building this brand experience, if you will, and that's going to manifest itself for us in a store through TV, through our website. And again, it's like multi-touch. I always believe you have to have consistency of message anywhere a consumer might experience you. And so if you have one approach for your performance channels and one approach for your brand channels, those things are going to be incongruous to a consumer. And I think there's a lot of brand equity that's like up for grabs right now as people are coming out of the pandemic differently and looking for where do they want to shop. Part of that is because we talked about at the top of this call, DEI initiatives and sort of how you evolve and discuss your brand purpose. That's more and more and more important to consumers today, and so that has to be there alongside your, hey, have a promotion that's going to be a search campaign this week, right? And so I think what we've been doing is figuring out how those things really do live together, because you can't always split them apart. You shouldn't split them apart, because I think you're going to start to lose the plot with the customer.
Yeah, that increasingly seems to be the case. So in terms of as you've mixed up the media, and obviously you talked about doing more in digital. I mean, what's exciting you right now? I mean, are things like connected TV on your radar screen? Like what sort of specific media channels and platforms are you a bit more excited about, focused on, and so forth?
Yeah. Connected TV, like I said, looking at places like Twitch. I think sort of all of it is up for grabs. And I think one of the things that is easy to do as marketers and decision makers around marketing investment is to say, hey, this channel feels outdated or old fashioned, and so we're going to push it to the side. And so as an example, I mentioned when I joined Joseph A. Bank, there was a heavy investment on direct mail, catalog. We scaled that back significantly, but it certainly hasn't gone away. And so it's like, that's not, as it goes, throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think that there is, use, and again, super targeted. We have to make sure that we know what we're doing. We're testing into it, looking for the incrementality, so on and so forth. But, I always want to keep looking at, hey, are there things that we should bring back to the fore? We have been doing a lot of audio campaigns, and a lot of that's through satellite radio, but what is the terrestrial version of it that, again, if I want to be hyper targeted in a market and get the people for in Dallas to go to our 6 Joseph A. Bank stores, maybe that's the right place to be, instead of a nationally funded campaign. And so I think what is getting me excited is when we're able to turn on things and scale into TikTok, which is, I think, super fun right now for a lot of what we're doing. Like I said, Twitch, connected TV, I think, is a great place to look at, because again, we can be targeted, struggle with some of the results on the reporting side, but it's great that we again know who we're getting in front of. But similarly, I want to make sure that we are looking at the entirety of, there are tactics that are still super effective and actually play really well with more contemporary digital platforms, that we shouldn't forget about.
Yeah, well, I wondered when you were not doing as much digital. I mean, how did that skew age-wise? I mean, I'm going to make an assumption that you were probably missing a lot of the younger audience when you were, kind of married, if you will, to more traditional channels by and large.
Yeah, no, I think you're totally right, Cathy. That's, to the point I just made on how we use direct mail, that's still probably our older customer who likes to shop in a store and is not as digitally savvy or focused. Over the pandemic, we've been increasing in our integration with Facebook more and more, like I think all brands are. But knowing that I wanted to, again, specifically get in front of a younger demo, I had the team really focus on Instagram only buys, and we, over 2019 to 2021, increased our millennial customer penetration by 5 points. So we're able to really see the payout of, okay, we're going to hyper focus on this, and it actually worked. And so you do have to kind of, again, marry your mix to make sure that you're covering your demographics. But yes, I think there are probably some demos that are aligned with certain platforms more than others. And that's where, again, I love getting as many inputs as possible. And I want to now go and dig in on some of the white papers and podcasts that you've been, referencing, because I think all sort of like, data points are useful in figuring out kind of directionally where you should be headed next.
Yeah, yeah. Well, great. Please check our stuff out. But I wondered if you could say anything about what you're seeing in terms of why people might go to to the brick and mortar store and why they're shopping online. Like what does that look like? What are the rationales for one versus the other? Or how does that hybrid activity work? Do people shop online and then want to try it on? And so like how
Yeah.
what are you seeing there in terms of
Yeah.
trends?
And I think in our business, it's maybe a little bit more specific than, say, broad apparel, because again, we operate with a lot of tailored clothing
Hmm.
in tailored categories. And so I think kind of like where you're going with this is someone going to buy a suit online? The answer is absolutely yes. But I think what's actually great coming out of the pandemic and that sort of omni-channel view is that it really gives the customer the opportunity to choose how they want to do each part of that journey. So, if I look at our wedding business, our site is absolutely the first place that people go because they can browse, they can see the looks, they can look at the color options, they can get inspired, and then they're most likely to then come into a store and get measured by one of our tailors, right? So like we offer, tutorials how to measure yourself through our website, but the experience of going into a Men's Warehouse or a Jos A Bank store and getting measured, was unparalleled. And so what I think is so great is that we can actually see that journey take place, whereby folks are deciding what they want to do online versus what they want to do in store. You can get measured in store, and then by the way, we'll ship the rental or the suit to you.
Hmm.
So again, it's like this mix and match, but your marketing mix has to follow suit, right? And so I think one of the things that
Yeah.
we've been really focused on with our partners is measurement for store traffic, has to be on pace with measurement for digital channels, right? You can't just say, yes, I'm only looking at people that go to the website, because your attribution is going to be probably pretty skewed, because at least through our business, what we're seeing is a lot of people still want to come into stores. And now, as we're still, coursing through COVID, some
Yeah.
of that is related to level of comfort, to sort of what's happening in someone's area, so on and so forth. But I think people want to make some decisions in the store. They want to do things from the comfort of their home, and it's our job to really make sure that we're showing up holistically.
Yeah, well, it's such an interesting time. I mean, totally different category, but we did run an article about 6 months ago about grocery stores
Mm,
and this kind of hybrid shopping experience, and how the motive. This was before Omicron, but the motive had changed from safety to convenience. But then people would go to a store for kind of those things you don't want to do online, like if you want to talk to the butcher,
sure.
that's not, he's not going to be DMing you, I don't think. We're not there yet. But it sounds like it kind
Yeah.
of applies across categories, no matter what what you do. So anyway,
Definitely. No, and that's where I think we just, again, as marketers in the retail space, just have to keep an eye on what is the expectation of us. What are those services and features and functions that we're going to continue to, and again, we do a lot of testing, but that we're going to test into and just see what the response is. And you're going to hypothesize on some things that aren't going to pan out the way that you thought they might, and customers just won't respond to them the way that you were hoping they were. But again, you've tried it, and you can keep evolving from there.
yeah. Well, is there anything that surprised you in terms of this, this hybrid behavior, is specifically like where you said, this is really interesting and I did not see that coming?
That's interesting. I will say not about the hybrid, retail channel behavior per se, although I do have an example there. But something that really struck me last year was the movement towards polo shirts. And I think on Jos A Bank, like, I know you laugh, but our head of our ecom for Jos A Bank was started to report out every week. Okay, we're seeing this uptick in polo shirt sales. And it's like, well, of course that makes sense, because yes, I'm in a collared shirt and a jacket today, but most people, they just, you want to look nice. And so a polo shirt is a great way to represent that on your Zoom. And so, our performance channels like really dove in to help, like, how do we really get market share there? And we saw just huge year-over-year increases in polo shirt sales. And that for me was like that one of those like moments where you're like, you just synthesize the data that's in front of you and kind of like see that hint of, okay, here's where we can take this. And so I would say that was
Yeah.
kind of, for me, one of our like kind of like retail, like, shining stars during the pandemic. I think in terms of, omni-channel behavior and what's been surprising, I kind of alluded to it earlier, but is that yes, I'm going to do part of this online, but there are certain things I just really want to have that kind of like physical like assistance through. And that's great because it means that there's still certainly a reason for being for, our retail footprint. And
Yeah.
again, where we sit, we offer unparalleled service. Like we have tailors in every store, associates, we keep getting these stories as weddings, there's this backlog of weddings. It's everybody's trying to get married, and we have store managers driving tuxedos to a church to make sure that it gets to the groom on time. And I
Yeah.
think that level of service that we at Taylor Brands provide is something that, again, people want. And so you can't get all of that through the website, which makes it so great because, again, we can really connect the dots in terms of here are the things we're going to let you do online, which is still quite a lot, but we're always going to be here to service you as you need in our stores.
Yeah. So are you seeing upticks in, sort of interest in dressing up? Are we there yet? Please say yes, even if it's not true.
Party of one, yes. I've been there for a long time. I'm ready to dress up. But yes, no, I think people do want to dress up. And, it's, again, interesting, like looking at some of the insights that we get. And through our wedding business, we have a close partnership with the Knot, right? Where couples are going to get registered. And,
Yeah.
I think they were calling it sort of like maximalists. Like people want to like just go over the top now because we're in this place, hopefully, that, you can go out to an event with the proper protocols in place, of course, but you can go out to an event and you can see friends and you can go to dinner, you can go to a wedding. And so I think people are definitely like going back into that mode of, okay, I need to like refresh my wardrobe, and I really want to, again, look great, feel great, and sort of everything that comes along with that. So I would say, yes, we're definitely seeing that, which is exciting. And I think as, just culturally, everybody's ready for that sort of
Yeah.
celebratory moment.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's interesting just based on the last conversation and talking about,
Mhm.
the metaverse
Yep.
and personally, I'm like, no, I want to go to a party where there are actual people and wear something nice.
Right.
So, so very basic question. What is your definition of effectiveness right now? How are you defining that?
That's a good question. Um,
Thanks.
but it's not a basic question. I think it has a lot of complexity to it. I think,
Yeah.
there's so many factors that you have to look at when you say if something's effective. And if you, again, kind of go through, the retail journey, when we do kind of like weekly, business reporting every week, one of the places that I'm always kind of pushing on the team is the quality of visits. And so, we'll say, hey, we just got 1 million, impressions on this, or 2 million people came to the site. And it's like, well, great, how qualified were they? So going back to something I mentioned earlier, to me, the effectiveness of your targeting is paramount. Like if we're not getting in front of the right people, like that then really starts to get into media waste, but it's also just not a good use of kind of like our time. It also starts to create, I think, poor brand perception. I know if I get targeted by a brand that I have no interest in ever engaging with, I start to feel differently about them. And so I think
Mhm.
effectiveness really starts with, okay, like who's your target? Who are you going after? And what are the right ways to get in front of them? And then it just starts to like move on from there. And so like how do you get those people to actually engage with your brand and your content and your advertising? How do you then get them further to consider you for, a purchase or a service or wherever you kind of sit in the industry? And then obviously finally conversion. And so I think effectiveness, that's why I said it's complex, takes on many forms. But to me, it really starts with targeting and like, are you showing up and getting in front of, who your core customer either is today or who you want it to be?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, you're right. It is a complicated question. So you did very well with that. So we do have a couple of questions from the audience. I'm just going to
Sure.
touch base briefly on those. One is just what the difference is in consumer targeting between Men's Warehouse and Joseph A. Bank. Can you
Oh,
address that?
sure.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, I think it was interesting when I joined the company, it was surprising to me to see how little overlap there was between customers. And so I think, part of that is just based on geography. Joseph A. Bank was started in Maryland, has like a big customer base in, sort of like mid-Atlantic in the South. Men's Warehouse was more sort of like west south kind of like customer base. And so and they have different kind of like vibes and aesthetics. And also one of them is a vertical retailer. Joseph A. Bank is all our own product. Men's Warehouse is a house of brands, if you will.
hmm
And I share all of that because I think we do look at the targeting slightly differently. There are definitely age differences. I think there's like event and moment differences. Jos A Bank has a larger sportswear penetration at the moment. And again, I think that was just based on how the brand was built, whereas Men's Warehouse really is like predominantly like that's across the portfolio where we do our wedding and our rental business. And so I think through those differences just in the mix, we definitely have targeting differences between the brands.
Yeah, I mean, does one skew older than the other, or does it, can you be a little more
Jos A
specific
Bank
about?
tends to skew older. And again, that's just going back to like effectiveness of
Yeah,
marketing. We have to be aware of that as we kind of start mapping out the journey just to know who we're getting in front of. But yeah, so there's, interesting the overlap that does exist or doesn't exist. But then I think from a targeting standpoint, yes, there's age demo, there's HHI, there's geography, and a number of other factors that we always take into account.
yeah, thank you. So this week we kind of answered this, or you did, but I'm just gonna give you this question
Sure.
again, if you have more to say, just about the omnichannel media mix. How do you define and measure success for these new channels, especially knowing some channels don't look great in terms of platform attribution or last click analytics? That's the part that I was like, yeah, let's talk about that.
Touche. So true. I think, well, and if any of our partners from Google are listening right now, I would say they've been side by side with us on figuring out, again, like I mentioned earlier, what is that sort of store traffic attribution to make sure that we're tracking exposure to the marketing to, getting someone into one of our stores. And that is a continuous journey and challenging journey, but one that I think, we're definitely on. And so, yes, that becomes really important. To talk about like last click, yes, I think that's always going to be like, we're always re-looking at what is the right attribution window, and it is somewhat specific to channel, right? And the expectation out of how someone's going to engage with, what they're seeing and where they're at. Specifically on the wedding business where people get engaged 9 to 12 months before their wedding, it's very different than sort of direct response retail advertising, right? Because again, there's like a life cycle to that. And so we've been really spending a lot of time figuring out, okay, what is the right attribution window there? So I unfortunately don't think that I have, sort of the quick and easy answer on it, just to say that it is something that, we've been doing a lot of work on, again, like with partners like Google on, okay, how do they help us just solidify the attribution for store traffic and the revenue attribution there. But then I think that sort of like attribution window is always something that we're assessing and looking at and refining.
Well, if you did have the answer, you'd be a billionaire right now. So
right, true.
Anyway, I'm just.
But it's always good to like hear what other people are doing, right? And maybe it'll inform the way you approach it. So
how are you adjusting to everybody's favorite topic, the demise of the cookie?
I think it's something that we are all just keeping a close eye on. And obviously we've been tracking sort of like the impact it's had, as of late. And I think it's also looking at what are platforms, Pinterest being one of them, like what are platforms that aren't, as reliant upon, cookies, and how do we, just find new ways to, again, look at our total attribution and our reporting. So again, it's one, I don't think there's a crystal ball by any means. We're definitely seeing a little bit of an impact, but it's also, again, what are the other platforms that we can look at? How do we make, again, our analysis whole to like take into account the fact that, that is now just sort of the reality that we're as marketers all facing.
Yeah. And, obviously some platforms like Facebook, can continue to leverage them. But I guess, what we found is there's probably like 100 different potential solutions, and there's not going to be a winner here. It's just going to be a bunch of solutions that make sense for individual marketers. So anyway, have fun, everybody. So anything else in terms of change of how you pivoted to work from home? We talked about the polo shirts, but someone was asking for a little bit more elaboration on that.
Sure. I mean, I think from a product standpoint, yes, it's like, let's figure out where we can really lean in and win based on a shift in consumer behavior. So again, it definitely was increasing our sportswear penetration because that's what people were needing and wanting. And then through that, what are the right channels and what are the right ways that we're messaging and showing up to talk about those things? And so, whereby our site or our email campaigns would maybe have, hey, here's this one module about polo shirts, it just became a more predominant part of our messaging. And so I think that there were a number of things that, and again, I give our entire team a lot of credit for the agility that I think we all had to sort of undergo during the past couple of years. And it was about finding those bright spots. So yes, polo shirts was one, but I think it was just, again, more casual attire in general. How do you remind people and inspire them, right? And so it's like, what is the editorial imagery that we would, shoot into and really show to customers to say, hey, like, this is what this could look like. And I think one surprising thing was people still did want to dress up. It was maybe like a backyard family reunion, or it was
Yeah.
a 5-person wedding instead of a 500-person wedding. But I think it's still important for people to feel the confidence that comes with, dressing up for those life moments. And we didn't see that going away. And so we wanted to make sure that we were still sharing with folks that we offered, everything that they wanted, regardless of the event, and sort of regardless of, it looking differently than maybe they thought it might.
Yeah. Yeah. So what are your predictions for 2022? Do you have a crystal ball there, like off to the right? You can bring it out.
I wish. I know, like you said, but I think we'd all benefit from that. I think 2022, maybe kind of like global logistics challenges that a lot of retailers are facing aside, I'm hopeful for, again, what consumers are going to want out of retail, how they're going to acquire it. Again, the Deloitte study that I referenced earlier was talking about, again, I know, so timely, was talking about, just this uptick of people being willing to buy and invest in the things that they want. And so I'm hopeful that we're all going to kind of like reap the other side of that. Just like, again, Jennifer from LVMH was closing out talking about the lipstick is back. I think, again, like weddings, we certainly know we're back and people are going to dress up for those. And you're probably going to have multiple weddings and you're probably going to buy multiple suits. And so I think that's what I'm really hopeful for, is that, again, we see this kind of return towards, yes, like we want to engage in our day-to-day lives. We want to see the people that we love. We want to have those, special moments and really celebrate them. And, fingers crossed, we see 2022 paying that out.
Yeah. Well, one thing that's interesting too, I think, about people's behavior is of course we think this is over and then it's not, but how we predict to those different parts of the cycle is fairly predictable right now. That like, we're gonna go back to doing more online shopping for a while,
Sure.
but then we'll come back out, and it's
Yeah.
relatively predictable even as we like make our way through it. Anyway, what opportunities do you see for 2022? Biggest opportunity? More weddings?
More weddings. Yeah. Again, I think we're anticipating that we're going to see, a huge number of weddings. I think all of the industry surveys say there's going to be more weddings this year than since 1984. So we're here, we're prepped, we're excited. Prom is back. So, I think those are two kind of like very, two predictions specific to our business. And then I think, generally, like what I'm also just like really excited for is continuing to play in different marketing channels and trying out new things. And like, that always gets me so excited because it's, sort of, again, you get those learnings on the other side, whether it worked exactly as you thought it was going to or not, that you then, start to apply to sort of like how you plan the next thing. And so I'm really excited to see some of the plans we're putting in place for spring 22 and like just, what they're going to net for us and what that means, for how we plan our marketing investment for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I'm very excited to know about what happens with the Twitch activation, to the extent that you can share that.
Me too. I'll report back.
So we do have that, everybody. And do you have any last challenge? Do you see any big, I mean, of course there are always challenges. Is there one challenge that you're particularly concerned about right now?
Yeah, I think, again, it's just making sure that we, again, have the product that customers are coming in to look for, that we're communicating it to them effectively. And, I think, again, every day there's like something new that we're all facing as we kind of like, again, go through this pandemic together. And so I think it's just staying agile, staying on our toes, and making sure that we can, service the customers to the best of our ability. So it's going to be, I think, a continuing challenge, certainly through 2022. And we'll just have to, again, kind of like, bob and weave and pivot with what gets tossed our way.